What's going on, guys? It's Kyle here with Gnarly Knives. Today we're going to be looking at this new knife. Well, it's new to me, and I actually didn't even know it existed, but it's been around since 2013. It's this here. This is the Buck Spitfire. This is the s30v version. I believe this one is more recent. You can still get it in the original version, which is still with the aluminum handles. That comes in 420 HC. That one I know has been around since 2013. These, I believe, have been around at least the last couple of years. I don't think they've been around as long as the knife overall. But the main reason I picked this up is actually because I want to be able, over the next few months, I want to do some videos with this. So this being the initial impression, then doing the full review, and then depending before or after the full review, I want to do a comparison because this knife reminds me so much in materials and, general overallness of it, the Benchmade 940, the regular one with the aluminum handles. So I want to do a comparison with that because that knife goes for about $100 more than this. So this one here you can pick up for about $80. So it's still not a cheap knife, but for the materials and everything, I feel like overall, I would call it budget-ish. So if you don't want to drop almost $200 on a Benchmade 940, not that there's anything wrong, I love the 940. That's why I have two of them. But with materials and everything, I am just curious how this will hold up. Because I've had my first 940 I got a little over a year ago. So I'm curious to see how this stacks up against that. So eventually, in the next few months, we'll have a video comparing the two. And whether, at least my opinion, on whether I think or not the 940 is $100 better, or if this is $100 worse. So I just think that'll be kind of fun. So let's do the specs on it real quick, and then we can get into talking about it. Some of the stuff I do like about it. There's a couple of things I'm a little neutral, I guess, on, and yeah, we'll get into all that. So this here, so I already said, so this knife goes for about $80. The weight on it, I looked up. I still need to get a scale. The weight on it, it's 3.7 ounces. So it is a little bit of weight, but considering it's aluminum, or all metal rather, it makes sense. And it's not a small knife. It's definitely not a big knife, but I would put this in the medium range size of knife. So I don't think the weight on it is nuts at all. We'll do some specs. So we're looking at overall length of 7 5/8 inches. The total length of the blade is a little under 3 1/4. It's about 3 3/16 inches. The actual cutting edge, though, is about 2 3/4 inches. Say maybe 2 7/8 inches. So a little under 3 inches on the actual cutting edge, and then just under 3 1/4 on the full blade length. So that makes it kind of nice because depending on areas and stuff, that 3.5 inch rule for a lot of states. So this will definitely put you in that range. So let's see. So it is a cool knife. It's comfortable in the hand. It fits my hand pretty well. I like the way it handles. I like the way the handle handles. But it is comfortable. I mean, it's a relatively neutral handle. It does curve a little bit towards the finger, towards your index and then your pinky finger. But it doesn't have any of the ridges or anything. There is some jimping on the bottom by your pinky. And then on top of the handle, it has a little bit of jimping and then just a little bit riding up that hump on the blade. But it's comfortable. And one benefit of having that such a long, the length of blade, but having a relatively short cutting edge length in comparison to how long the blade is, it almost works out like a choil. Or I'd say actually it does, because I can fit my finger right in there. It's not as comfortable as a regular choil, but you know, if you need to do a little bit closer up or feel like you need a little more control of the knife, you're totally capable of doing that. And even with the size of my fingers, my index finger fits right in there, and I'm not riding up on the back of the blade or the back of the edge in any way, which is pretty cool. And two, I mean, I'm sure it's just, you know, the design, but it's, to me, it's very reminiscent of Spyderco. Instead of the thumb studs, it has the cutout, but it opens just like that. It's definitely not super smooth, but I haven't taken this apart yet. Just being part of the first impressions, I am going to probably take this apart tonight, if not, you know, the next few days, but I will have this taken apart probably a couple of times by the time I do the full review. I usually like to wait at least a couple of months, if not longer, of actually using it to really get a good idea of how well it, you know, how well I like it and how well I think the knife is. It's kind of cool. I mean, it does have a little bit of a recurve action going on, but we'll get back to that when I get to those. This is one of the things I'm kind of neutral slash not sure, I don't know if I really like that much. I mean, but it is cool. So, you know, you do have that little bit of a recurve. You know, I kind of, if it's like a recurve, I kind of like it where the curve starts like halfway up the blade, but here it just kind of trails off into a curve. But like I said, we'll get to all that. It is a, you know, so no thumb stud. It does have the whole opening. It is a back lock, and what's cool is it does have a 4-way directional clip, so it makes it nice for any of our left-handed people, left-handed knife people. It's a totally ambidextrous knife, which is really nice. It's something that's kind of nice with, you know, going with the 940. It's something that they have in common. They're both completely ambidextrous knives, so that is a nice touch. It definitely allows more options for more people. And like I said, it is the s30v steel. S30v I love. It is a really good steel. And it's the Paul Boss heat treat. So this is my first experience with the Paul Boss treated s30v. But I do have quite a few of the 420HC, that's the Paul Boss heat treated, of some of my other buck knives, and just buck knives I've had in the past. And then I just have other knives in general that are 420HC that are not treated by Paul Boss. And yeah, I'd say, you know, there's a little bit of a difference. I mean, you know, 420HC isn't a super high end or anything like that. But whatever they do with it, I mean, you know, using side by side, I'd say, yeah, I notice a little bit of, it does stay sharper a little bit longer. So that makes me excited for this. But with s30v being a higher end steel, I'm curious to see if it'll be a more noticeable difference, because you can really kind of crank out the HRCs more on this than I feel like the 420HC. So it is pretty cool, and because, you know, I love s30v, that really attracted me to the knife. And also too, because most of my folding knives are either flat grinds, saber grinds, and, you know, I have a few, I have one or two Scandies, but I don't really have that many hollow ground folding knives. I actually have more hollow ground fixed blades than I actually do folding knives. And hollow grinds do make really nice slicers, and this is like a really good hollow grind. I mean, you can probably tell a little bit with the way the light kind of reflects how it's dished out. I mean, they really thin this down. And the edge on it, I'll say, just with the quality, fit, and finish from the factory, because I haven't sharpened it yet. I've used this a little bit in the few days I've had it, because I believe I got this last Wednesday. So, you know, 4 days-ish. And from doing some cutting with it, I mean, the edge came pretty sharp. I mean, of course, you know, you can always get it sharper, but factory edges, no matter how sharp they are, they're usually pretty coarse. But this does slice really well. I noticed after a little bit of use, when it came to some things, like I sliced up a few tomatoes with this the other night, and though it would take a little bit just to get the cut started, just because, you know, the factory grind and everything, but once it started, it just sliced right through really, really well. I mean, honestly, this sliced through a lot better than my flat grind knives, which, you know, most kitchen knives are flat grinds. So that did really well. I was pretty impressed with that. And I know once I get this really sharpened up, it'll slice even better. But it's a very even grind. I mean, you can see just on the tip, one side is a little bit taller than the other. And I'm talking like just notice. So, you know, as most grinds come, you know, if you get them anywhere close to even on both sides, I'm usually pretty happy. But they did a really good job with this. And I've noticed Buck in general, you know, because I probably currently have 4 or 5 Buck knives. And I've probably had I've had at least another 2 or 3, if not more, just growing up. And though I don't remember the ones from growing up, how the grinds were, but since I really got into like sharpening and stuff, started paying attention more, my other Buck knives have all been pretty even. Like, I don't have to spend that much time or any time at all reprofiling when I sharpen. I can just throw it on the stones, you know, make a burr, work through, get them where I want them. So that I was pretty impressed with. One thing I'm not sure, and I will update on this in the description when I take it apart either later or this week, but from looking at it, I even got a flashlight in. I don't believe this has washers, so that's something I'm just kind of neutral on. It would definitely make the action better. It's not a bad action, but you have to really kind of get your thumb in and flick it, which wouldn't be as much of a problem, but the edges on these is really sharp. Like, I'm pretty sure you could cut yourself with them. So I'm going to probably take a little bit of fine sandpaper, you know, even like something like, you know, 2000 grit. Any will really work, but I'm going to probably just use a little 2000 grit and just kind of hit the ridges on this here just to kind of soften them up a bit. But also too, the jimping on the handle, when you rub your finger over it, they definitely have either a burr or just how they were ground in, but they're pretty rough and scratchy. But that I'm not sure yet, because I know, you know, it's anodized aluminum, but if I sand it, it's going to take that anodization off. And I mean, it could look cool because then it would make each of the slots will be the aluminum color on the top and bottom of the handle, but I'm not sure if that's what I want to do yet, so I'll just see. It can be very delicate, but we'll see how that goes. That's not something I'm going to jump into yet, but I'm definitely going to do that with the thumb stud, because one of the things I want to do is I want to actually give this to my kid. So I think, yeah, I'll definitely at least do it with that. But I'm going to have to work the action a little bit because it is a little tough, because she had trouble opening it. So I think doing a little work, taking it apart, cleaning it, I think will definitely help. I mean, of course, not having the wash is a little bit of a drawback just with, you know, smoothness in action. But I don't think that's what this is designed for. I believe this is just, you know, a general, like, EDC. It's like a work knife, because it's, you know, definitely built well. I mean, the handles are thick. You know, it's like each side of the handle is about 1/8 of an inch thick, if not probably a little bit thicker, because it's rounded off, so it kind of like gives a little bit of the illusion. But, you know, it is a hard belt knife. This is not a knife I would be too worried about putting through its paces. I'm pretty sure it would hold up. I'd definitely be more confident with this than some other more expensive knives. But very cool. Like, I kind of like the color. I mean, because most of my knives fall in the black, tan, you know, green, more, you know, like darker shades. So just to have knives with some different colors, I think is kind of cool. So I, you know, got a red handled knife now. And also too, I was just noticing is it's not totally even where the bar is for the lock with the handles. It's not quite flush. On the very bottom of the knife it is. So like this kind of whole area, it's flush up to about here, and then it's just, you can see it's a little uneven, which really isn't a problem functionally wise, but they are just pretty sharp. So that's just, you know, something to think about. But if you don't mind just getting a little sandpaper in there, I mean, honestly, if you spend 10 minutes with it, and just take your time sanding and stuff like that. Then it'll be totally fine. But it's just something I just want to bring up, because even me with my like calloused fingers, I'm not worried about getting cut on the handle, but I think this definitely could, especially with, you know, how hard you have to really push your thumb just to get it to open. Like, you have to kind of dig into it. So it's something that, you know, I'm pretty sure my kid with her soft hands could probably get cut. But it's cool. The clip-on, I mean, I think is a little goofy just because of how large it is. I mean, I don't mind the placement of it because I don't think like every knife needs to be deep carry. And I kind of go back and forth with deep carry, how I feel about it. But this is huge. And it's, you know, separated in the middle. It splits out to have buck, like the branding on it, which, I mean, I totally get it. But I mean, I feel like they could have put it further up, closer to the pivot, and have buck, and then they could just thin out, because it's kind of just weird looking to me. I mean, it's of course not a, you know, that's a subjective issue, but of course it, you know, it clips in the pocket fine. I mean, it does, you know, it's intended to, so it's completely functional. But it's just kind of like, I don't know. And then the blade centering, which is funny because the gap between the two sides of the handle is almost exactly how thick the blade is. But there's no rubbing. Because you look at it, it looks pretty dead center, but then again, there's like hardly any tolerance between the blade and the handle scales. So I think they have it dialed in pretty well, because like I said, you could probably barely slide a piece of printer paper between the blade and the handle scales. So, and it's not rubbing, because even on the blade you don't see any scratches, but also on the handle where the blade like looks like it's almost touching, there's no removal of the anodization or anything. So they definitely dialed it in well. So that's something I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be too worried about floating around. And there's like no movement. There's a teeny bit up and down, but that's just back locks. But side to side, I mean, this thing is not moving. But that's why I'm curious to see when I take it apart. I really don't think that there are washers. So, you know, definitely a good coating of oil. What I might do if it doesn't have the washer is no, I think the oil would be better. I was thinking maybe using something a little bit thicker oil or something, but that might work. I don't know, I'll see. I'm going to just start with the stuff I use on everything, the Benchmade, the Blue Lube, but I don't know if that doesn't work. I do have some thicker, just general oil, just in the garage that I can use. Not like motor oil, but it'd be a little too thick, I think. Not that I would use it anyway. It'd be something that, you know, is fine around food. Just because I do, you know, probably a third of what I use all my pocket knives for is for cutting food. It's more because I like it. I mean, we have kitchen knives. I just don't use them because I just use my pocket knives. I have my kitchen pocket knives. Oh, that would be kind of cool. So that's something I think would be cool. I should do that at some point. Maybe just build like a drawer insert, and then I can just put like my longest folding knives and just keep them in there, and they can just be, you know, have like a small one could be like my folding paring knife, and just, you know, work up the line. That would be silly. But it's a functional blade. The only thing with it is just where that recurve is. I mean, if the curve, but see, I don't even know if it would even be called a recurve. It has a curve at the end, because I really feel like the curve should be like closer up around where the belly is, and then, you know, kind of work its way in and then come down. But it's just, you know, it's like straight blade all the way back, and then it just trails off. And to me, I don't know, I just can't decide if I think it looks goofy or cool. And it's like, the more I think about it looking goofy, I think it looks cool. But then the more I think about it looking cool, I kind of feel like it looks goofy. I mean, I've even kind of thought of, I don't think I'll do this because it would just be a lot of work putting a new bevel on. Just with how thick it gets back here, especially behind where that little beard on the blade is. But I was thinking maybe just using like a file, bring it in pretty close, and then finish it with a coarse stone, and just kind of grind it and then make it completely flush. So just remove the hump altogether. I mean, that part wouldn't be hard, but it would just be getting the new bevel on, because it gets pretty thick back here towards that choil area. So you can kind of see, because I would need to kind of basically reprofile, probably down to about where my finger is, the top of my finger. So that would just be it would be a little dicey. But at the same point, even by the time I got to there, I'd already be working with the same cutting edge that I'd already be with. So at that point, it would just be how much I just felt like working at it, just to try to extend the blade length. Because if I could, I would almost rather, like, part of me almost wishes they just brought the edge all the way back to, like, maybe up to about 1/8 of an inch, because that gap, and I know it's not really a big deal, of course it's just all preference, but yeah, that's like almost 1/2 an inch between the cutting edge where it ends and where the handle is. So I mean, even just adding an extra 1/4 of an inch of edge, because then that would just bring it up, it would be a 3-inch cutting edge, and I think it's like perfect, but I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. It just, just what I'm thinking when I, go back and forth between, oh, that's kind of cooler, and it's kind of lame. I don't know if I like it, but I don't know. I'm more or less in the middle on it. What is cool, though, just with going with the blade, I know we already talked about the little awkward beard on it, but the hollow grind, very nice. But also, it's funny because it's a fairly stout tip. So definitely this knife is made for, if not stabbing people, of course, you shouldn't do that unless it's self-defense, but just don't. As a general rule, try not to be in those situations if you can help it. But no, in all seriousness, no, though, something that you definitely made for doing, if you have to cut into things, or stab into something, and when you're cutting, because it's fairly robust, but it has a really almost secondary edge swedge on the tip. I mean, that's almost like a knife edge, and part of me is almost thinking about at some point getting another one of these, like leaving this one as is and to give to my kid, but getting another one and then just modifying it, like actually just for fun, but sharpen the swedge, because that swedge comes all the way almost 2/3 up the blade, and it is like almost knife point, because even if you like rub your fingers across it the way you would the edge, like, I mean, it's not sharp enough, like it won't cut you, but I feel like just a minute or two, a couple minutes on a stone, or it will slice. So I think that's kind of interesting. But it adds a little bit of robustness to the tip, the way it's ground, but it also helps with if, any stabbing type motions you have to do. So that I think is kind of cool. I mean, overall, the knife itself, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 100, I mean, I'd probably put it at like a 70% cool. I mean, I don't know I mean, this of course only works for me, I guess. I'm trying to think, I don't know what I think my coolest like pocket knife that I have is. I mean, I don't know if any of them would quite hit 100, but I'd say most of like the knives, because the ones I like to buy, I already think they're pretty cool. This one I bought more because I thought it was interesting. So maybe that's better way to put it. I don't know if I never necessarily think it's really cool, but I definitely think it's very interesting. Just something about it. And then too, because I tried to find some other stuff. I mean, there are some videos. I mean, you can find a decent number of videos with people discussing these. A lot of them are older, and a lot of them are covering the 420 version. I mean, overall, it's the same shape and everything in the knife, just one will cut a little longer. But I was just very like fascinated by it, and until I actually really got my hands on it, I didn't really know like too much. Other than the few videos I watched, and the ones that I watched, I didn't really notice anyone really talking about some of the stuff that I'm mentioning. So I don't know. Then again, some of the older ones, who knows? You know, I mean, some of the things could be just because it's mine. This particular one. So, you know, that I'm curious to see if anybody else has these, any of the versions, just what your thoughts are. But I think for 80 bucks, I really think this is a pretty good deal, just especially compared to what you can pay for some knives like with these materials. The only one that comes close that I think of in my head is the Cold Steel Code 4, which you used to be able to get in CTSX HP, but now you can get it in s30v, both of which are good steels. I mean, personally, I'd probably go with the XHP. I just really like XHP. But the s30v is a really good steel. So I really think that it would be something people could compare this to in that sense, because they're both around 80-85 bucks. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and remember to keep carving. Peace.